Hey people, this is BIGBMH's take on Batman Part 5. This video is about some of the ideas I had that didn't exactly fit into the other videos I've made so far. The Batmobile was destroyed during the Dark Knight, so this provides the opportunity to update it and make it a little bit cooler. I don't really want to see any major changes, but I think it'd be pretty cool to have a new design and maybe some new features to it. Maybe they could have multiple Batmobiles, like keep the tumbler and add a new, sleeker, stealthier model that would be for different purposes. A lot of people didn't really like the heavy armored look of the Batsuit that they used in the Dark Knight. I really didn't mind it that much, but I still think there's room for improvement. The second suit had a lot more range of motion than the first one did, so mobility is important. The new suit, whatever new suit they bring in, needs to keep the range of motion and the protection. Costume design, it really isn't my specialty, so I don't really have much of an idea how they can change and improve the suit. At the end of Batman Begins, Bruce and Alfred were talking about making improvements to the area of Wayne Manor that connects to the Batcave. During the Dark Knight, the mansion was being repaired, so we really didn't get to see the Batcave at all. I think that with these improvements to the Batcave, they should keep the natural feel of the Batcave that they had in Batman Begins, but have it a bit more developed. I'm thinking of things like maybe a training area, a lab section, an armory, like some kind of garage to hold the tumbler and the pod. It's just more materials that would be useful and sensible for Batman to have in the Batcave. And the mansion should have some kind of cool way of accessing the Batcave. I actually prefer that Batman speak with the raspy voice rather than the very plain voice that previous actors before Christian Bale used. But a lot of people really think that the Bale Batman voice is kind of distracting and cheesy. And I've got to admit, there is room for improvement there. I'm a really big fan of Kevin Conroy's rendition of Batman from Batman the Animated Series. His Batman has distinction from his Bruce Wayne, but it's not really that extreme. So with Bale, I don't want him to change it very much, but maybe a little more emphasis on the deep tone of the voice and a little less emphasis on the rasp of the voice. So just take a little bit of a note from Conroy. Like, if you totally change it, you kind of lose the disguise and the intimidation factor that his Batman voice has, which I think really is important to his take on the character of Batman. So I don't want to completely change anything, but maybe just a very subtle, slight change would be good. One of the things that has really separated the series of Batman movies from the previous ones is how well developed the supporting characters are. I think that bringing in more familiar characters to the movie series would help to bring the movie universe closer to the Batman universe of the comics. The characters who come to mind for me when thinking about this are Renee Montoya, Harvey Bullock, and Dr. Leslie Tompkins. Bullock and Montoya would kind of serve to show that the Gotham State Police Department is getting more good and trustworthy cops. Bullock would probably be one of the people most interested in bringing Batman in, whereas Montoya would probably have had more experience with Batman and not really buy the whole story of him turning into a killer. She'd probably be looking to find the truth in the whole story. Dr. Tompkins would serve to show Bruce that he's got kind of a family of people that care about him. Somewhere over the course of the movie, Bruce could probably sustain a serious injury, like maybe a gunshot wound. He would refuse to go to the hospital because obviously they would probably have some idea that Batman shot and be looking for someone with a gunshot wound, so going to the hospital would be dangerous for him. So Alfred would turn to Dr. Tompkins because she's an old family friend. Naturally, once Dr. Tompkins finds out about what Bruce has been doing and the state he's in, she'd want to stick around to be there for him and make sure he's okay. By the end of the movie, Bruce would sort of realize, without the whole thing getting too sappy, that he's got a close circle of people that he can really trust. Gary Oldman has done a really great job portraying Jim Gordon so far, so I'd like to see more good material for his story in this movie. He'll have to struggle between trying to steer the police away from hunting Batman and trying to avoid casting suspicion on himself. He knows that Batman's doing good for the city and wants to help him, but he really can't easily communicate with him anymore. Everybody knows that he was working with Batman before the controversy of Batman being thought of being a killer happened, so any hint that he's still working with him could really land him in a lot of trouble. He could lose his job, his reputation, and possibly go to prison. So he's really under a lot of stress right now. So both him and Batman are having a really hard time, so at some point in the movie they would probably take it out on each other and have a really big argument. By the end of the movie, they'll have made up and the relationship would go back to normal. The hunt for Batman has to end somehow, so in order to do so, Batman has to regain his credibility and respect. This probably means that the city has to find out what Harvey Dent has done and the whole truth of his story. By the end of the movie, I think I'd like to have a final scene with Jim Gordon and Batman that takes inspiration from a scene from Frank Miller's Batman Year One. It would involve the police coming to a scene where something has happened and Batman is unmasked. Jim Gordon is the only one close enough to see him, and he looks Batman right in the face and says to him, "You know, I'm practically blind without my glasses." The two of them exchange a smile that sort of symbolizes their transition from just allies to being friends. Batman turns to leave, and then he stops, turns around, and says to Gordon, "You know, I never said thank you." And Gordon replies, "And you'll never have to." Then Batman runs off, Gordon stays and waits for the police to come. This last exchange between the two is a reversal of their lines to each other at the end of Batman Begins. And I think it would be a really nice touch to have that, to show that it's a mutual relationship. And I think it's really, having Gordon find out Batman's identity would be a nice end to the story of their relationship for this trilogy. This will be Christian Bale and Gary Oldman's last scene together as Batman and Gordon, so it's really important to get it right. So I think this would be a pretty cool way to do it. That's it for this video, and that pretty much wraps up my take on Batman 3. But I've still got one more video coming in which I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts on what they should do with the Batman franchise after this movie. As usual, I've posted a link to my full written article in the description section. So thank you for watching, and tune in next time.